Hello, my name is Ashley and this is Faithful Rattos. Welcome or welcome back. So as you can tell from the title of this video, today I'm going to be talking about controversial rat care opinions, and I actually asked for your suggestions on my Instagram and on my community tab, and I had many to choose from. A lot of them were similar or related or the same, and so I've picked the 10 I think most controversial ones, or the 10 most interesting to talk about, and also the 10 that I've not already made like long videos about. So I actually have made a video about Adopt Don't Shop. So whilst that is a controversial sort of opinion in rat care and just pet care in general, I have made an entire video on that. So I'm gonna try and remember to link it somewhere in the description and the tag card things, I don't know. But I'm not going to talk about Adopt Don't Shop. I disagree with it, but if you want to go and find out my reasonings and a massive in-depth sort of discussion on that, go to that video. That video also has some really great comments, and there was some nice discussion going on. So if you're interested in my thoughts on Adopt Don't Shop, I do have an entire video on that, so go and check that out. So the 10 that I've got, and the first one is this: the number of rats per cage doesn't matter as much as people insist. And I wholeheartedly agree with this. I think there's some people, and specifically some Facebook groups, that are very, very, very stringent on what their sort of cage minimums are, and like something like 4 rats to a double critination, which, if you've got 4 rats in a double critination, that's an amazing amount of space for them, and as long as you set it up well, they will thrive in that. But that doesn't mean that 6 or 8 or 10 wouldn't also thrive in that space. And I think it really depends on you as a keeper, your rats, their relationship with each other, because that matters a lot. I think there's a lot of adult book groups who don't do well in excessive amounts of space. I've seen there's a lot of people that have like magnificent double, triple, quadruple cages, and those can be great, especially for large groups. But if you've got a small adult book group, giving them that much space can actually be a detriment to their relationships with each other, and it can put extra sort of social stress on them. So I think it really depends on your rats and their sort of needs and their emotional sort of connection with each other depends on that. And I think it's really damaging to tell people who have a perfectly acceptable number of rats in a cage that they're like neglectful or something, and I've seen that go on in certain groups. And there is one particular rat setup group on Facebook that is full of much nastiness. And I've had some of that directed towards me in DMs, not just on the group, by admins and mods. And I really think that this is something that is a little bit subjective and depends on your rats and you and the way that the cage is laid out. Because if you've got a massive cage and it's not laid out well, then it's still a bad cage. I don't think people take that into consideration as much as they take the mere size of the cage. The size of the cage matters, but how you set it up matters as well. The second controversial opinion that I'm going to talk about is it's dangerous / extremely risky to not euthanize a bitey rat. Now, I know this is quite an American-centric, a US-centric opinion, and I disagree, but that doesn't mean that I think behavioural euthanasia is unnecessary or wrong in every situation. I think behavioural euthanasia is sometimes necessary, and there was a time where I was getting to a point that I thought perhaps I would have to do behavioural euthanasia. I haven't made a video talking about it on my channel, and I do plan to make one in the future, but my Remy had an awfully difficult time in intros, and there was a period of time where I thought it just wasn't going to work, and that would be on the cards for us, and that made me very, very miserable, because as most of you know, Remy is my heart rat and such a special boy, and I would have also felt like I was letting his previous owner down with that decision, because he came here as a lone rat to get company. And I think making that decision, I would have done it if it was necessary, but it would have broken me as well. And I don't think euthanasia for a behavioural reason is bad for any animal, for dogs, for whoever. I think sometimes it's necessary. However, I don't think it's necessary in as many situations that some people think it is. Some people think that a rat that bites you once needs to have a behavioural euthanasia, and I think that's absolutely ludicrous. Ludicrous, I think. if you haven't even neutered that rat, you haven't even worked on bonding with that rat, depending on the reason for their aggression, that is totally unfounded, and there's no reason that you shouldn't try other things to solve the problem before getting to that point. Behavioural euthanasia is a last resort. You cannot come back from that. You cannot change that decision once you've made it, and that goes for any euthanasia. And that doesn't mean I think you need to exhaust all opportunities, and I think euthanasia, I've made a couple of videos about it, is a really hard decision, but I don't think it's a last resort, but I also don't think it's a first resort. I don't think it's something that we should resort to first unless we've tried other things, or unless we know other things wouldn't work. And I think it's really damaging to say to people that if a rat has bitten you once, it needs to be put to sleep. Because there are many reasons that a rat might bite you. It might be unwell. There might be something underlying that you need to figure out with the vet. It might be scared. It might have come from a troubled background. It might be scared of you. Or it might have hormonal aggression, which is entirely treatable in most cases. And not trying treatment, which is a neuter or the suprachlorin implant, and not trying to treat that before resorting to such a permanent decision, in my opinion, is unethical. And it makes me really sad when I see that rats have been put to sleep for one single bite. And yeah, that's my opinion on that one. So the third topic that I'm going to talk about today is breeding out health issues and the ways in which breeders do this. I personally think that if there's a way to breed a healthy version of a variety, whether that be black-eyed white or need I say hairless rats, then okay, have a go. I think it gets to a certain point where if it's not working and you're continually putting rats in this position and you know they're going to have these life altering issues, that you should stop. But I don't think it's at the same place for every sort of variety with health issues, because not all of them are at the same level, and some of them are ones that you can breed out, and some of ones are not ones that you can breed out. For example, in hairless, the issues that being hairless carries, some of them are genetic and some of them are linked to the lack of lactation in mother rats and other sort of health issues. But some of them are sort of situational. They're based on the fact that the rats don't have fur. They're more easily scratched, that they find it more difficult to regulate their temperature. They have an exorbitant amount of eye issues that is just very stressful for the rat and the owner to keep on top of cleaning out, because they don't have eyelashes. And I also personally think breeding a rat purposely to not have whiskers, which is even more important to them than their eyes, is unethical. And for those reasons, hairless rats, in my opinion, there's no way you can breed out those issues unless you breed hairless rats that have eyelashes and whiskers. But even then, you still have the skin and the temperature regulation sort of situation there. I just don't think there's a way to breed that out. But I do think there's a way to breed out other things, the genetic things sometimes. Sometimes it's not actually related to the genes involved in that specific variety. Sometimes it is related to sort of add-on genes, things that are just coming along with it, and you can breed that out. However, I think in most cases and for most breeders, you get to a certain point where it's not fair on the rats involved anymore to carry on trying, and there's many times where this has happened. In the UK, the most recent one I think is Harley. People tried. They tried to breed out the issues in Harley, the skin issues specifically, and even with special diets and multiple generations of trying to breed these issues out, it still was a huge problem. And people have decided, collectively, those breeders who were involved, that it actually wasn't fair to carry on. And I think being able to make those decisions is actually really good. And I do think that if necessary, rats affected do need to be called. I don't like that word, but they do need to be put to sleep if they're too badly affected. For example, I know people have put to sleep Harley rats for skin issues because it was affecting quality of life very severely. And I think that's something that shouldn't be looked down on. I don't think letting an animal be free of suffering is something that we should be looking down on. But I think the reason why they got there in the first place is important to look at. And when it gets to a certain point, you know, that you take a pause, you stop, and you reevaluate if this is worth it for the rats, not just for you and anybody else who wants this new variety. The next topic that I'm going to talk about is crowdfunding for non-rescues, specifically without giving people something in return. So I personally think that if you are not a rescue or part of a big rescue operation, so for example, here in the UK at the moment, and I'll put the link in my description for you to donate and help, there was lots of rats dumped in the woods in Somerset, and a couple of breeders and pet homes and just general fanciers have taken it as a group effort to go and get all of those rats out of the wild, which somebody dumped them in, get them the vet treatment and look after them. A lot of the does are pregnant and have had litters. There have been losses. Most recently, one of the does, who was quite an old doe, came in pregnant. She had her litter about 3 weeks ago. They're 3 weeks old now, and she passed away because of health conditions, because of how much she had bred. And in those cases, that's not a rescue. That's not like a specific organisation. However, that's a specific cause, and we know exactly what's going on there. Where I agree with this thing is I don't think it's appropriate for people to crowdfund for their pets' vet bills. And I think it's very controversial to have that opinion, but I think that's your responsibility to deal with, not everybody else's. And if the difference between your pet getting the vet care that they need is strangers giving you money, I don't think it's responsible to keep that pet. I've seen them many times being shared on Instagram, people fundraising. There's a car driving down the road with its boot open and something very big on the inside. People fundraising for a lump removal surgery for a rat, and the lump is a third of the size of the poor rat's body, and they're not booking in that surgery until they get the sort of amount that they need, and that rat is suffering. And that's definitely where I think if you cannot afford the vet bills, and it sounds really harsh, and it is, especially currently with the cost of living and everything that's going on, it is harsh, but it's not fair to the animals to not get the vet care if you can't afford or you don't have family or friends that can help you. Because I think there's a difference between asking for help from your family and friends than it is asking publicly for like GoFundMe donations. Yeah, I just think it's not okay to do, because whilst it does make me sad on principle, I would never donate to one of these things unless I was getting something in return, because then you're earning that money, not necessarily just asking for donations, and that makes me feel very icky. So I know a lot of people will sell small things or make jewellery or sell cheap sort of commissions, like drawings. That's okay, but I don't think that donating for nothing in return for a personal pet's vet bills is appropriate. And I feel really bad, not bad, but I feel really nasty saying that, but it shouldn't be my responsibility and the general community's responsibility to pay for everybody's vet bills. I don't know, it makes me feel icky, and I do agree with the person who sent this. So the next one is that rat shows are cruel. And if you've spent any time on my channel, you know how I feel about that. I think it's a silly, silly thing to say. There's two sort of fronts on this. The first one is they are a necessary, very, very necessary. Oh my god, there's a squirrel on the balcony. Oh my god, the squirrel's on the balcony. Oh my god, can I get it on video for you? I think I'm going to try. Hold Look, look, look. There she is. And yeah, it's a she. Those aren't balls. It's just like a rat. Oh my god, look how cute she is. Guys, so we've been feeding, quote unquote, the birds. No, we've just been feeding this specific squirrel. She's a bit chunky because she's been eating suet this entire time. But she is going to go into hibernation soon, so I think it's only fair. She's very cute. So, as I was saying before, I noticed a squirrel running across the balcony. Rat shows are an important tool for breeders to ensure that they're breeding well-typed rats and that their rats don't have any conformation issues. And obviously this matters when it comes to sort of the colour and variety and making sure that matches standards. But most of the time it's important for type. And if rat shows didn't exist, there would be many more breeders who struggle to have other opinions on their rats to make sure that their rats are in a healthy body shape, and that's really, really important. And I think that's one of the most important things about rat shows and other animal shows. I don't think every single fancy is doing it perfectly, and I don't think the rat fancy is doing it perfectly. There are things that I would like to see change about the way that we show rats, and I could make a video about that in the future perhaps, but that doesn't mean that I think shows are inherently bad. And people say that rat shows are cruel because the rats are stressed out, and if you'd actually been to a rat show, you know these animals aren't stressed out at all. In fact, they sleep most of the day on their backs in silly positions, and they absolutely enjoy the attention that they get. And if any rat is at a show that isn't enjoying it, they are disqualified. That is enough for a disqualification, and I don't think people actually know that about rat shows. And that is what happens if there's a rat that isn't enjoying the show. They will get disqualified. And people don't bring rats to shows that are stressed out at shows because they wouldn't do well, and so there's no point in bringing them. And yeah, I just think it's absolutely just laughable that people think that rat shows are stressful to the rats, because they aren't, and they've never been to one. That's not to say that animal shows can never be stressful. I think there's certain species that will handle that stress less well, for example hamsters. But the thing with hamsters is they actually haven't been domesticated that long, and they are nocturnal, so that does impact the sort of showing situation. And I think it's still important for all animals to have this sort of communal eyes on what breeders are doing to make sure they are bred well. But I think for each species there's sort of different ways that we can tweak it to make it not stressful for those animals. And when it comes to rats, shows aren't stressful, and if you think that they are, please come along to one and just see how much the rats enjoy it, and hopefully you'll see how wrong you are. So the next controversial opinion is that pellets/nuggets are better than a bad mix. I'm going to disagree with you on that one, mostly. Because when it comes to feeding any animals, yourself, your pets, rats, whatever, there are two things to consider. One, is it the natural way of that animal eating? Is it mentally stimulating? Are they enjoying their food? And then the second thing, is it nutritionally balanced? Those, in my opinion, are very equally balanced. Feeding a nugget, no matter how nutritionally sound it is, will never meet that first one, that first criteria of it being natural and enriching and fulfilling for them. It just never will be. And for that reason, no matter how nutritionally sound a nugget is, it's also never going to be specifically suited to the rats involved. Whereas with a mix, you can obviously edit it and change it and make it more suitable for the rats depending on their stage of life, etc. If you are not in the position to make a mix yourself, especially in the UK, there are many places you can buy a ready-made mix at rat rations, rat accessories. There is no reason to be feeding a nugget. There just isn't a reason to do that. And there's not a reason to feed a bad mix either, because there are very, very good mixes commercially available. Not at big chain pet stores and not for zero shipping. No. But there are very good rat mixes available, and if you're not willing to buy them, and I can't say that there's any lab lock nugget pellet that actually meets the nutritional needs of rats properly anyway, that has good ingredients in it anyway, so it's not something that I'm willing to sort of like swap for. I think they're equally important, but that doesn't mean you have to make a mix by yourself. If you can't do it correctly, buy one. It's as simple as that. So the next one is also food related, and it is that rats have a fast metabolism and it's not okay to limit food. I think this is baloney, because in the wild, rats are foragers. That means if they can't find food, they don't eat. And that's how their body is actually made to survive. In fact, having a regular fast day every month or every so often is actually very good for rats. It's just laughable to me, because if you free feed rats, they will get fat. There is no reason to free feed rats past kittenhood. And their metabolism doesn't really have anything to do with it. Do you think that people who are weighing out their rats' food have like under-conditioned rats? Because I can assure you that's not the case. Yeah, no, I really disagree with that one. It's silly in my opinion. So the next one that I'm going to talk about is the carrier method isn't always the best method. And I think this is true. I don't think the carrier method works for every situation, but I think it works for most situations and for most rats, and it's the safest, most efficient way of introducing rats than the other methods that require a more drawn out process. And that's not to say that every rat will get on well with the carrier method. They won't. There are exceptions to that, and I have one of them. My Remy that I spoke about before, he wasn't introduced only using the carrier method. There was other things that we were doing at the same time and before that made the carrier method work. But that doesn't mean that the carrier method is cruel or doesn't work or is bad. I think, in my personal opinion, having perhaps it's a higher stress load at first, but having that in a much shorter time frame instead of dragging it out is actually far more beneficial to the rats than having a lesser amount of stress but drawn out. Because we all know that stress can affect the health of rats, and if it's drawn out for a long time, that's going to have the chance to have more of an impact on their health, which is another reason why I think carrier method is preferable if it will work over neutral space and other methods. Now, there are some methods that I think are absolute toss. For example, scent swapping and being next to each other in cages, or, as I've read in my comments recently, having like meetings and like with no intention of those rats living together. Yeah, carrier method doesn't always work. It isn't the method that will always work, but I don't think that means you can write it off or that it isn't efficient or that it isn't good. Yeah, I actually had an interesting discussion about this in one of my comment sections recently. So the second to last controversial opinion that I'm going to put in this video is at-home euthanasia, and the person who sent this in disagrees with it, and I don't fully disagree with it. I think there is a line. I think it should only be... Oh, the squirrel is pole dancing. I think it should only be... She's so cute. So I think it's an interesting topic, and I think it's very nuanced. I think for experienced people, and especially breeders, sometimes it's necessary. And sometimes, you know, at-home euthanasia, without the sort of vet involvement, is actually far less stressful for the situations where you know there's no other options. And I have friends who do it, and I don't think they're wrong for doing that, as long as it's done safely and the first few times that it's done, you're actually sort of mentored by someone. I don't think it's a bad thing. But I think for the standard pet home, who doesn't have a sort of history and experience of medical issues, that isn't okay. And the method that is chosen is also really important. Obviously, if you just stamp on the rat, no, that's not okay. But there are, I'm not going to talk about them, but there are safe, humane methods. Safe is a relative term. There are humane methods that it can be done with, that I think for those experienced keepers, especially breeders and rescues, that it's actually very important to be able to do that in certain situations, especially with litters and things like that. And I just don't think that, don't get me wrong, I don't think like the average pet home should do it. I definitely don't do it. I don't think I could emotionally handle that at this point in my sort of rat keeping journey, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong. It doesn't mean that people shouldn't do it if they're doing it safely and they're doing it well. Yeah, I think obviously people are going to have a lot of emotional opinions to that one, and that's okay. We can disagree on that, but I don't think you can say that it's always bad and that people who are doing it are always sort of doing it wrong, because there are a lot of situations, especially for breeders and rescues, where it's necessary. And for people who are quite a ways away from an emergency vet, if there's an emergency situation, it's far less stressful and sufferable for that rat to go at home than it is to have that emergency vet trip that we know how it's going to end. I mean, it's not a happy topic at all, and it's sad, but I don't think that it's necessarily wrong if people choose to do that. We're going to end it not on so much of a sad note, we're going to end it on a silly note, I guess. People taking rats outside for exercise is the most dumbest thing you could do, in my opinion, because there are so many diseases out there that we cannot vaccinate our rats for. Why on earth would you want the chance of them catching it? Plus, the stress of being outside in an open space, they might just run away. And then thirdly, predators, cats, dogs, birds of prey, foxes, not worth the risk. I think anybody who does it is deluded, to be quite honest with you. It's ridiculous. And if you can't find ways to exercise your rats inside your house, flat, wherever you live, perhaps you shouldn't have rats. To be quite honest with you, I think it's ridiculous. Those are the 10 controversial topics that I'm going to talk about in this video. I may have enough to make a second video, probably shorter than this one. This is actually very long, so sorry about that. But yeah, so that's the end of this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'd really like to hear your opinions in the comments about what you think about all of these topics, and I think the discussion might be very interesting. So if you have any thoughts and opinions, whether you agree or disagree with me, do let me know in the comments. Please be respectful if you are discussing with people who disagree with you. And yeah, thanks very much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!